1045theteam.com, ready to join the Fifth Round podcast. Our first episode, we're here, ready to go with your host, Ian Foard and Brian France. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian, the closer, Mariano, and I'm here just as more of an observer, getting to learn a little more of the UFC about my two experts here, Ian Foard and Brian France. Check us out. We're going to do this weekly on 1045theteam.com. You can catch us on Radio Pup as well. Ian Foard, what is our first topic of this week, sir?
Our first topic this week, we're going to talk about the upcoming Fight Night 102 card in Albany. It's going to be the first card local ever, third card for the UFC in New York. First one being back in Buffalo in 1996. And then the Madison Square Garden card will be number 2. This will be number 3. It's headlined by Derek Lewis and Shamil Abdurakhimov. Heavyweight fight. Right underneath that, Brian, going to be Gian Vellante and your favorite,
Pat the Durkin Cummings.
And after that, we'll have Francis Ngannou and Anthony Hamilton. So you got a light heavyweight fight and 2 heavyweight fights right up on the top of the card, followed by bantamweights Rafael Assunção and Aljamain Sterling, and Oluwale Bamgabos and Joe Gigliotti. So, Brian, what do you think about the main event, Lewis and Abdurakhimov?
That's going to be a good fight. I mean, Derek Lewis, he's a beast. He's now gone.
Quite literally a beast. The Black Beast.
The Black Beast.
6'3". He's going to weigh in right at the limit of 265. He's on a 4-fight win streak right now. Last fight, Roy Nelson, first big major name on his record. Gabriel Gonzaga was a decent win, but Roy Nelson, somebody that everybody knows, finally picked up that high-ticket win he needed to make a name for himself, and he finds himself in his first main event slot.
Of course, and you know he has that power. Obviously, with Roy Nelson having the chin of all chins, the chin of steel, he wasn't able to knock him out. But the 3 fights before that, 2 TKOs and a knockout, I mean, the guy's impressive.
I expect to see the same thing we see every time he steps in the cage. Derek Lewis is technically not very good. He is not a technical fighter.
No.
He has a lot to be desired in his footwork, a lot to be desired in the way he chains strikes together, but I have never seen a guy with that kind of power who can just take care of all his technical shortcomings immediately just by being quite literally a freak.
Yep.
Abdurakhimov, on the other hand, he's just a grinder. So I don't know if we're going to get to see the brawl we want or if we're going to see a lot of clinch work and a lot of Derek Lewis trying to outpoint Abdurakhimov and Abdurakhimov trying to hold him on the fence. But it should be good. Vellante and Cummins, on the other hand, that's probably going to be fireworks.
That's going to be a great fight. You have Gian Vellante, the striker, against the wrestler and Pat Cummings. I mean, it's going to be who can stand and bang and who can stop the takedown, because Gian Vellante has phenomenal kickboxing, great striking. He trains with Chris Weidman. He's a phenomenal fighter. And then you got Pat Cummings, who in his debut fight had all that talk against Daniel Cormier, saying how he was wrestling him during practice and making him cry. But obviously, we saw how that turned out.
And he may very well be fighting for his job. At this point, he is 1-3 in his last 4, and they have not been pretty. He has been knocked out 3 times since his loss to Ovin St. Preux. His Ovin St. Preux was number 1, then Glover Teixeira knocked him out, and then Little Nog managed to finish him, which at this point, Little Nog is at the tail end of his career. That doesn't look good on your record. It's not that Little Nog's not a good fighter, but he's getting up there in years. He's not finishing everybody. That's 3 times he's been finished by strikes in his last 4 fights. If he loses this one against Gian Vellante by strikes, and Gian's got the power to do it,
He definitely does.
he might get his pink slip, and we might not see much more of Durkin.
Yeah.
Following that up is the Francis Ngannou Hamilton fight.
I'm so excited to watch Francis Ngannou live because we do have tickets.
We did just get tickets.
Francis Ngannou is an animal. He's just so powerful.
For anybody else looking to get tickets, they do go on sale October 28th. And as far as the price point goes, if you're looking to go to a card, this is much more affordable than the Madison Square Garden card, which is going to go down as probably the most expensive card to go to in the history of the UFC up to this point. As far as the Hamilton and Ngannou fight, we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's kind of, for me, it looks like a setup fight so that Ngannou can look good on a main card to the public. It's a free fight card on TV. So anybody who can't make it, that is free. It is not a pay-per-view. And Ngannou is probably going to light Hamilton up. Hamilton is nothing but a grinder. He's traded wins and losses since he came into the UFC 6 fights ago. Ngannou's got crazy power.
Crazy power. Since he's been in the UFC, he's knocked out everyone in his path.
If you are new to the sport and you just want to see some fireworks, that's the fight you should be focusing on, because Ngannou hits people like a Mack truck. When he hits you, it hurts. It hurts bad, and you probably are on your butt. Even
if he doesn't land right, it's going to hurt.
And
you can hear it.
Hamilton's had a suspect chin before. I expect to see. I'm not real big on coming straight out and saying I think a fight's going to go one way, but I expect to see Ngannou beat the brakes off of Anthony Hamilton in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Hamilton, he's been suspect recently. I mean, he has a knockout win in his last fight, but a decision loss to Shamil, who's the headliner. Then he had another win, and then before that, Todd Duffy knocked him straight out of the park. And Todd Duffy, he's all right, but he's no Francis Ngannou.
No, and he's not what everybody expected he was going to be years and years ago when he was a hot prospect. The last fight I think we'll talk about for that card is going to be the Aljamain Sterling Rafael Assunção fight.
Phenomenal fight.
I don't understand why that's not the main event.
At least the co-main event.
At 135, both of those fighters are coming off a loss. Both of those losses broke long win streaks. Assunção had a 7-fight win streak, and Aljamain Sterling was undefeated, I believe, going into that fight.
Yeah, he was.
Now, you've got the two of those guys are going to go nuts. And it's not like they lost to bottom feeders. Aljamain Sterling lost to Brian Caraway,
who's top 5.
Mr. Misha Tate, and how everybody should know him. He is finally making a name for himself and coming into his own. He looks like he's on the way to title contention. And Assunção lost in a rematch to TJ Dillashaw,
which he
previously
won.
Beat.
Yep.
And both of those were hard-fought decisions. Those were not quick finishes. Those were not guys getting just beat nonstop. Those were hard-fought fights, close decisions. I expect this to be an absolutely great fight.
Oh, it's going to be a phenomenal fight. I mean, Aljamain Sterling trains and resides in New York, so you got to cheer for him. Hey. Down in the city trains with Matt Serra, Ray Longo, one of the best fight teams out there right now. And you got to just cheer for the hometown guy.
Absolutely. I was still hoping they were going to hire Albany PD's own back on, but it didn't happen. I won't throw his name out. He'd probably be embarrassed. Next, if you want to go over some recent results, Bellator 162 just went down October 21st in Memphis, Tennessee. Bobby Lashley with a big win. Alexander Shlemenko with a big win in the main event as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Alexander Shlemenko just signified the title shot.
Yeah.
So,
and then followed it up by saying, I don't really want a title shot. I just want fights. Probably the first time I've ever heard that. He must be hurting for money. To turn around and say, this is a title eliminator from the brass up top. Mm-hmm. And then he wins and says, I don't really care about the title shot. Just give me fights. I want to fight every 8 weeks.
Well, when you're on a suspension for illegal substance, you definitely need to just fight and make that money.
Absolutely. It's Shlemenko's first fight back since September of 2014. He lost that fight, and then he got flagged for elevated testosterone levels. From memory, I believe it was something like 3 times the normal levels of testosterone a human body should have. Served a suspension. It was supposed to be longer. He went overseas and fought a couple of times in Russia. The suspension was lowered. He won his appeal. Now he's back, and he's back in style, finishing Kendall Grove in a second. And Kendall Grove didn't look bad.
No, he didn't look bad, but Kendall Grove couldn't read the spinning crazy strikes that Shlemenko has.
I would have scored that first round for Kendall Grove. Kendall Grove came out and started doing some damage. Started really putting the beating on Shlemenko. Shlemenko came out in the second round, started throwing that spinning stuff he's known for, got inside, got a takedown, landed some ground and pound. I think it was a liver kick that finally knocked Grove down on the ground and ended it with a couple of follow-up punches. It was a great fight. And then Bobby Lashley. You know how I feel about Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, I do.
He beat Josh Appelt by rear naked choke, one of the worst rear naked chokes I've seen in a while, round 2. More of a neck crank, really.
Well, when you're that big, all you need to do is do a neck crank.
Apply a little pressure and it kind of hurts. I mean, Josh Appel is not exactly a household name, and it's really hard to find any household names on the record of Bobby Lashley. I understand he's a big wrestling star, and everybody wants to see him succeed. This is no Brock Lesnar, though. I mean, you could read me off Brock Lesnar's resume, and I go, okay, that's a good fight. Oh, yeah, that's a good guy. That's a big fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you cannot knock the guy for having a 9-fight win streak.
9-fight win streak's good. A 9-fight win streak is great, but a 9-fight win streak over regional talent that really doesn't deserve to be on a televised card, yeah. I still say I'm more impressed by a guy who comes into the UFC and goes 1-2 than I am by Bobby Lashley's 9-fight win streak.
I mean, it is Bellator, and they're taking the scraps of whatever they can get that's not in the UFC. And it's limited right now.
It is. It's the biggest problem with the heavyweight division in MMA. For anybody who doesn't watch enough, it's really hard to find a guy who's in prime physical shape and weighs more than 225 pounds. It's not easy. You're talking about guys who need to run.
So, Ian, I have to ask you this. Since you were going on and saying how you're more impressed with someone to come in the UFC and go 1-2 against the top competition as opposed to someone that has a decent record, 8, 9-1, is it just because you feel like any of the lower levels don't compete with the UFC, or is it something that, you look at a someone who dominates in minor league ball as opposed to up to Major League Baseball? Is that kind of a correlation to your 4 major sports kind of thing?
It really would be. It's not the same. It's not like you have a tiered system where the guy's not major league level. There are some guys in Bellator, Brian could name me a couple that we think could be top 10 guys.
Oh, most definitely.
But it's hard to say. How many guys have come over from Bellator and have taken a belt in the UFC or at least competed for one?
Yeah, the lightweight champion from Bellator just came over fighting. Now he's fighting Conor McGregor. Is a lightweight champ of the UFC, Eddie Alvarez.
In Madison Square Garden. That's your main event. Now, that was a Bellator guy. We had this discussion about him a couple years ago.
But he was good enough to fight in the UFC before he even got into Bellator.
And
he should never have been there.
It's also a lighter weight class. Unfortunately, the higher the weight class goes, the harder it is to find quality fighters. 155, 170, you have animals everywhere. You have killers. Mm-hmm. You could go 20 deep, and any one of those guys is a fight to 2 away from a title and could win it. Yeah. Heavyweight MMA is a little different. The UFC's got a heavyweight division where the average age is well over 35. I believe it's 36 years old. That's a problem. But
do you think that Dana White's holding on to those guys just because he knows that some of them are names and that maybe, in your opinion, should Dana White kind of let these older guys go and try and build up that heavyweight division?
This has been a discussion for a while. You have a lot of guys, for instance, Roy Nelson, or the recently finally released Bigfoot Silva. Antonio Bigfoot Silva was knocked out how many times in a row? But the UFC hung on to him. The UFC kept him around because they need those guys. They need the big names, and they need the big guys. Derek Lewis, headlining the card in Albany, is one of the first guys in a very long time at heavyweight to come out and look good and not be 38 years old. We need him as fans to have some success so that we can get a competitive heavyweight division. Everyone should be excited for that fight and be excited to have it in their hometown in Albany to go watch it, because that may very well be one of the next guys that we can be excited for at heavyweight.
Or Francis Ngannou.
Absolutely. Even Anthony Hamilton and Shamil Abdurakhimov. I mean, it's going to be harder for Abdurakhimov. He doesn't speak much in the way of English, and he's got a really hard name to pronounce. So it's hard to catch on with fans. On the other hand, you come in as Derek Lewis, you got that cool nickname, you're the Black Beast, and he speaks well, believe it or not.
He's got a great personality. He loves being on the mic. He loves taking over.
For anybody who's a fan, if you look at that heavyweight division right now, you and me could list off 5-6 guys that by the time I turn 30, in 4 years, they're gone.
Yeah.
Josh Barnett, how much time's he got left?
Andrei Arlovski.
Roy Nelson. It keeps going. And
possibly
these are
even the champion Stipe Miocic.
Absolutely. Stipe's got a couple years, sure, but the guy he just beat in Fabricio Verdum, he's almost 40. He's a couple years away from 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of Randy Couture and maybe Dan Henderson, it's really hard to pinpoint a guy who's had success that late into his career. It's really hard to do. And we also now know that both of them were documented users of testosterone replacement, and that's what made their careers last.
Yeah.
I mean, Randy Couture got out before it got into a big story, so not a lot of people are aware, but he was replacing testosterone. He was taking artificial testosterone to succeed, and Dan Henderson started it in 2006.
And then you look at Vitor Belfort, one of the stars of TRT.
TRT Tour.
TRT Tour.
My God.
Just a beast, but now look at him. I mean, he's not looked the same since then.
That's a big black eye. This is why we now have the drug testing that we have as fans in the UFC. That's why USADA is here, and that's why guys are getting popped everywhere.
1045theteam.com. This is the Fifth Round Podcast with your host, Brian France, Ian Foard. I'm your producer extraordinaire, the closer, Brian Mariano. Now, let's stay on that topic, guys, real quick, because I've heard you guys mention over the first 15 minutes or so about a lot of these guys that were caught for taking performance-enhancing drugs. Is there really an issue in the UFC right now? Does Dana White have some sort of real problem that he needs to take care of with all these guys that are taking performance-enhancing drugs? Because I'm not going to lie, you guys are much more into this than I am, but it seems to be, if you're the novice fan, that everyone looks at this, that all these guys are roided up to compete against each other. Is that really an issue that Dana White is fighting for right now, or is it something that maybe we don't know about?
It is very much an issue, but not like it was a couple years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, when the UFC and Zuffa brought in the USADA, it has changed. It's a game changer. It's making fighters way more clean. I mean, look at Michael Bisping. Just a few years ago, he was just in the top 10. Now he's the middleweight champion of the world for the UFC. It's changed some people, and others, it's made a lot worse.
And on top of they used to have an exemption. You could go to a doctor, and you could be diagnosed with low testosterone. If you are Vitor Belfort, who is diagnosed with low testosterone, you get to take an artificial supplement of testosterone, and it's not really regulated how you take it, as long as when you show up to the fight, your levels are okay. At the same time, you're now given an exemption to a guy who's got low testosterone. Conjecture, I can't guarantee this, but he's been caught with anabolic steroids in the past, with the same kind of steroids that Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds were taking. Now, for another to bring it back to another sport, Barry Bonds, Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, older steroids, older era, they were taking anabolics. Those are going to affect your testosterone levels. They bring them down naturally. So now you use steroids in the past. It hurt your system. Now you get to cheat again and use more testosterone to come back, which, again, that's what A-Rod was using. The accusations against A-Rod was he's eating gummy bears with testosterone in them.
Yeah.
And that's what the testosterone, honestly, it's almost unfair, because you take an older guy like Dan Henderson, who there's no evidence that he ever took anything like an anabolic, but he was getting older. He was in his late 30s. Your testosterone production drops naturally. Brain trauma, which is another problem in fighting, also affects your testosterone production, can lower it. He now gets to take testosterone to bring it back up like he's 25 years old, but he's got all the experience of a 20-year fighter.
Yeah. Or look at Bigfoot Silva. He's
got gigantism.
He's got gigantism.
Has a tumor on his pituitary gland, which causes gigantism. That's why if you look at him, he doesn't look like an average guy. He's got a giant head because he's got a pituitary problem. Now, he actually needs the testosterone to be a normal human being and function, but he's one of the guys who gets caught up in this and gets kicked right out.
Yeah, because he got kicked off it and needed it, he's been getting knocked out a lot more. And when he was taking it, he was a beast.
And to come back to everything now, the UFC's instituted a USADA program, which does Olympic testing. You can be tested 365, 24/7. They can show up to your house, and you have to go. They can show up to your gym, and you have to give a test. Some guys are getting tested 17 times and 18 times in a year. And also, you want to go travel somewhere, you got to notify them you're traveling so they can come where you're traveling and catch you. You're only allowed 2 strikes where they come and you're not home. You just decided to take a day trip somewhere. You're not home. They come and check. They want to test. You're not there. Strike 1. You get strike 3, you're suspended. That's it.
Now, in that case, so do you disagree with how harsh they're going about this, or does this really make more of a fair playing field for everyone? Because you were mentioning with Silva to where he needs this stuff. But, when you get a veteran fighter that may be able to take this, he knows what he's doing, but he gets this little bit of kick. Can we see that maybe a little bit of a disadvantage? But I think, from my outside opinion, that Dana White really has started to nip this in the bud, and it seems it's bringing out a little more fairer playing field. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I love that the UFC brought in USADA. It's way better, much harder competition. I mean, I just love the way it is. And then you look at Bellator. Scott Coker came out and said, "I'm never going to do USADA because I don't want to know. I'm going to let the athletic commission take care of it."
It's a money issue. It costs the UFC a lot of money, and I give them a lot of credit. The ownership has changed now very recently, but Zuffa, who did own the UFC when USADA was implemented, took a massive financial hit to do this, and took guys who it takes time to build a name up and to get a guy out there so that everybody knows who he is, household names, and you shortened their careers. Vitor Belfort was murking people. And he was knocking out guys he had no right to knock out, and he looked like the whole gladiator Greek Adonis figure. He was jacked. Now he looks flabby. He looks like he's coming up on 40 because he is. And he's not going to be able to make the money for them that he was when he was just crushing people. But it's okay for them because it's a clean sport. Now you still got people getting caught, and unfortunately big names like John Jones, New York's own John Jones, got caught, and there goes your title fight. There goes your belt. There goes everything. He's back on the sidelines.
But the only good thing is about that, he didn't even know he was taking it. They finally just came out with the lab tests that it was actually the supplements, and it wasn't even disclosed in the supplements.
Allegedly. I mean, this happens a lot. You also have unfortunate events where there's been a couple guys from China who ate tainted meat, and they had levels of steroids in their system because the meat they ate had it in there. And those guys get caught, and they have to sit there with a suspension for 2 months until they can test things and go, all right, look, the levels were so low, it's most likely tainted meat, and he's okay, he can come back in. But a guy like Frank Mir thinks he ate tainted kangaroo meat. That's what he's telling everybody, and his career is
what?
Tainted kangaroo meat in Australia.
Like, I've heard some crazy things from certain football or baseball players, but yeah, tainted kangaroo meat.
And his career is essentially over at this point.
Oh.
I mean, he's stuck on a contract with the UFC. It's an exclusive contract, so he can only fight in the UFC. He can't go anywhere else. Now, he can't fight MMA because he's suspended, but he could go do kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, whatever he wanted to do. He can't do it because he's on an exclusive contract, but he can't fight for another 2.5 years.
Yeah, now he's asking to be released from his UFC contract, but they're not releasing it yet because he is still a big name.
So do you have an issue with the fact that they're not releasing it? Or
it depends. You want to take the big corporations angle. Why let him go so he can go to your competitor? Because not just can he fight, but Frank Mir's an intelligent guy. He could go do commentary for Bellator, and that could actually affect the UFC's product. Or do you want to take the fighter side? Look, let the guy earn a living.
I mean, the guy's been with UFC his whole career. He's been a company man. I think he deserves to be let go and earn money. He needs to earn a living.
Yeah, I mean, that seems kind of weird for the fact that I know this guy has given you a lot, and I know you're upset for the way he's handled things, but you got to let the guy go and at least give him a chance to earn a living. That seems a bit outrageous for a team, or at this point, an organization, to hold this guy hostage pretty much.
It's unfortunate the timing, too, because it's right about the change in ownership.
Yeah.
This change in ownership is coming in. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of people getting cut. I mean, they cut a lot of staff. 80% of their Canadian staff just got cut. They're cutting people overseas, executives. It's almost like he got lost in the shuffle, and it might not even be a thing where they're trying to stick it to him as much as he's just not priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10.
Yeah.
So.
And the Canadian crew that they just cut was one of their best groups of recruiters and matchmakers. Everything was up there.
All right ahead of UFC 206, which is a great segue. UFC 206 in Toronto. It's not all that far off. And there is actually a boycott the UFC movement that is starting up in Canada because your biggest 2 Canadian names would be George St. Pierre and Rory McDonald. Rory was just cut, or not cut, but he signed with Bellator and
through free agency.
Said publicly he doesn't feel like the UFC showed him any respect. He was a title challenger. He was easily top 10 in his weight class, if not top 5.
He was easily top 5.
And now he's going to go fight in the small pool and beat up on all the little kids. And the UFC, he feels, disrespected him. Then you have George St. Pierre, says he wants to come back, but the UFC is not going to pay him what he wants. He wants a new contract. Now there's a big fight here. there, everywhere. May go to a legal battle. God knows.
So when it comes to these, St. Pierre's and a lot of guys that have been around for a while, it reminds me of contracts you would see in the 4 major sports. I've given you everything for X amount of years. You deserve to pay me this for what I've given you. And, Dana White and the UFC don't want to do that. Where do you guys stand on that?
It's a real unfortunate situation. There's no fighters union.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who knows if that will ever happen.
Also, it's not like you have sports teams within a league. You have separate corporations.
You have promoters.
Yeah, it's not like it's under Major League Baseball, so he can go from the Marlins to the Yankees to the Mets or whatever. It's like leaving Major League Baseball and going over and playing in Japan or whatever it may be.
And it's not like the MMA has the Ali Act like boxing does.
Yeah, and that may be coming. That may very well be coming. But at this point, unfortunately, what you have is Bellator, who is willing to pay for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
Only the big names with very popular following. I mean, they have to have a fan basis.
But do you blame them, though?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
Do you think Bellator should just start grabbing everybody they can?
Negative. Absolutely not.
Why not?
If Bellator does that, they will go the way of a long history of promotions who started big with a bang, signed a lot of people, went bankrupt, and got bought by the UFC. You can go all the way back to Pride, which is a little different situation, but then Elite XC,
Strike Force,
Affliction. These are corporations that came out. Elite XC was the first company to do a major cable television fight card with Kimbo Slice headlining, and they did 6 million views, which blew the UFC out of the water. Unfortunately, they signed a lot of people, gave away a lot of money, and then couldn't keep the ship afloat, and all their contracts got bought out and they went under.
Or then you look at Strike Force, they had some of the biggest names fighting for them, and now they had too many big fighters that they couldn't afford to pay all of them.
And Strike Force was run by the man himself, Scott Coker, who's now running Bellator, and I think he might have learned from his mistakes. What he's doing now is he's signing key pieces, big guys that are either malcontents with the UFC, they're not happy, they don't like where they are, they want someplace else. They may be willing to do it for a little less money, or let's be frank, the over-the-hill can't compete fighters anymore who still have a lot of name value and will pull viewers. Like
Tito Ortiz.
Yeah.
Chael Sonnen.
So he's the guy over there saying, "Oh, you don't like him over there? No, you come over here. I'll give you whatever you want. Feel free. Come on and fight for me. No big deal."
Well, the biggest thing is the Reebok deal. The sponsorship with Reebok is with UFC. Bellator, you don't need to have. They don't have you can only have Reebok sponsor. You can have whatever sponsor you want, so you can go out and get bigger money because.
Well, yeah, because if you're a fighter, you go out and you get signed by Nike or whoever it may be as just for you, or you have your own brand you want to go push. Now you can go there and they won't kill you over the fact that you have to have Reebok anywhere on you.
Yep, and the Reebok deal only has a per how many fights you have with the UFC pay scale.
Really?
So,
For some backstory, the Zuffa used to refer to it as the company that used to own the UFC used to refer to it as the NASCAR look. They didn't like the NASCAR look. You bought whatever brand shorts you wanted or were given them by a sponsor, and then you got random sponsors, and your shorts looked like the side of a NASCAR car.
Yeah.
I mean, like a stock car. You had brand stickered everywhere, and you got paid by each one. And depending on who you were, if you were a big name, you could pull more than your fight purse.
Yeah, if you're Brock Lesnar or whoever it may be, you got spots all over your shorts to just bring in more money for you. Absolutely.
And you might make almost as much as the UFC paid you just in sponsorships. Now, if you're the guy on the bottom of the card who's on the online streamed fight that's not even going to make a television prelim, you might get $2,000 for one sponsor. Or there were guys fighting with blank shorts because they couldn't even get a sponsor. So unfortunately, the guys on the bottom of the card who don't get paid anything to begin with, and we're talking contracts of $8,000 to show up and $8,000 more if you win. Now they've gone up a little since then. We're talking.
I think it's about 12, 16 now.
12 and 12 is your minimum for the most part. I mean, sometimes they're a little lower, but that's how the fight pay works. I pay you this much just to be here. You're guaranteed that money. And then if you win, you're going to make generally for at least the lower ends. It gets different for your big stars like Conor.
Of
but
course.
It's a show purse and a win purse. So both guys getting paid $10,000. Great, we're making 10 grand. But if I win, I get 20. You only get 10. Then you get taxed on that. Then you got to pay your gym. Then you got to pay your manager. You got to pay everybody else. You got to try and keep equipment going. By the time it's over, you made what, $3,000, and you're not going to fight again for 5 months.
Yeah, so you needed sponsors, but most of those guys weren't getting the sponsors they could.
As a fix, they brought Reebok in,
Mm-hmm.
and as Brian was saying, Reebok pays you based on how many fights you've had in the UFC.
So to break it down, I guess. So if I'm fighting, okay, Reebok gives me X amount of dollars just to be there and wear their shorts. Okay,
So-
now can I go and put anything else on the shorts?
No.
Or it just has to be Reebok shorts now?
Nope.
They give you a fighter kit. They give you like sweatshirts, like a whole fight gear.
Okay, so like an NBA player would get before a game, all the whole jump shoot, everything. Okay,
And you're required to wear all of it during fight week, which is the whole week leading up to the fight on Saturday night, or in some cases Friday nights. And any media obligation, anything with UFC, you have to wear this stuff.
So any appearance, you have to be wearing that stuff.
It is very much the NFL uniform policy.
So, but couldn't you argue that if I'm a big name, Conor McGregor, any of these guys, that you're now taking money away from me?
Absolutely, but
because
you're giving it to the younger guy, the smaller guy.
That's
true,
where,
but don't you think that these guys need to earn it? Because look at guys that are getting into baseball. First, Mike Trout, when he first came up, he wasn't getting endorsements. Then all of a sudden he has a great year. Okay, great. Now he's Subway. Now he's this and this and this. So he earned his keep. Don't you think that these guys would have to do the same thing?
Well, you are still allowed to have outside sponsorships. You just cannot have them on your uniform. So you're still allowed to do whatever commercials, whatever sponsorships come your way. You just can't wear them and display them at a UFC event on your uniform.
And Reebok does sign exclusive deals to bigger name stars like Paige Van Zandt, Sage Northcutt, Conor McGregor, those kind of guys,
So,
the big guys. But if, like, GSP, that's one of the arguments, he's with Under Armour.
Yep.
He's with all sorts of other companies. I mean, and he won't be able to wear any of that and make a crap ton of money off of those.
And he retired a few years ago. When he retired, this Reebok policy didn't exist. It wasn't there.
Yeah.
So now he's saying, well, you're not paying me enough because when I left, I was making extra money, and now I'm coming back. And the payouts for the top champs, the champions automatically make the most money from
50
Reebok.
or 40.
Sure.
It's somewhere in that range. It's not very much compared to what they were making, but it also allows the smaller guys on the bottom of the card to make some money, because we don't want this to be boxing where it's really hard to get a guy to come up because, hey, sure, how much did Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao make on their card? A ton of money, but how much did the two guys who opened the card make?
Not even close to that.
They made a couple grand tops. I mean, they made not even what the guy who opens up an online streamed card on the UFC in the cards that go off at 3 a.m. This guy gets a fight at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. when nobody's paying attention, and he still at least walks away with a solid $6 to $7 grand from Reebok, plus his show money. And the UFC does also offer performance bonuses if you have one of the best fights of the night, or if you get a great knockout or submission, you have the opportunity to win a performance bonus, which could be $50,000 to $75,000 right off the rip in your pocket because you went out and hurt somebody.
So to your credit, Ian, when you said it's exactly like what the NFL does now, to where these guys have to wear, whatever company it may be on the field, but off the field, J.J. Watt sponsors Beats or whatever it may be, and they can do that as much as they want as long as they don't, affiliate it with the UFC.
Absolutely. And it was also something where the UFC wanted to look more professional.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to blame the UFC for wanting to synchronize their brand to one company, but it still sucks for some of the fighters that have the bigger name that want to get sponsors to wear in the cage. But of course, they can do their thing outside the cage. Like Conor he was on that war video app.
Okay.
Like Call of Duty.
Oh, yep.
No, yeah, and he's in Call of Duty.
Okay.
He also has Monster. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff. Uriah Faber, he is sponsored by Torque, which is another clothing brand.
Metro PCS for everybody. I mean, you got Cain Velasquez, Ronda Rousey. Metro PCS is huge.
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey's doing that jean brand.
Buffalo.
There you go.
David Buffalo biting. Buffalo jeans.
1045theteam.com. It's the Fifth Round Podcast with our host, Ian Foard and Brian France. I am your producer extraordinaire, Brian, the closer, Mariano. Now, guys, you obviously know I'm the producer of Levac and Gaz, 1045 The Team every day, Monday through Friday from 2 to 7. Now, I was talking to Gaz a little bit today about the upcoming card at Albany, and he came to me, and he's really into it, much more than I am, like you guys. And he said to me, he goes, you got to ask them because I really think this is an awful card. He goes, I don't know exactly how they feel, but I think this is a terrible card, and I'm disappointed that they brought this type of card for the first time in Albany. What do you guys think?
I mean, it is a typical fight night card. You have the middle-of-the-road guys that have some name, but you need them to get a bigger name. So you can put them on the pay-per-views. But, okay. I mean, it is a fight night card instead of a pay-per-view card.
I'm going to agree and disagree both. It is a fight night card. You can't expect UFC 205, 206, or even any of the other numbered pay-per-views. The numbered pay-per-views, you pay to see. That's your big cards. That's your title fights. That's your big stuff. The fight nights are not going to ever be that. This, on the other hand, I mean, compared to fight night cards, this is not exactly your average fight night card. We discussed a week ago when they announced the main event. I like the main event. I'm excited for it. It's not really what you expect from a main event.
It's definitely more of a co-main event.
It is still a good card, and the great part about MMA is whether you get the names or not, watch the card because they're still going to be fun. Oh. Some of the worst on paper cards I've ever watched have been some of the best cards I've ever seen because you may not have the name, and the name makes a fight amazing. It takes a fight from really good to you're so invested in it, it's great.
Well, yeah, the name's going to take someone like me who watches it, for the numbered fights because especially 205 coming up where, guys, if you're listening, I hate you for getting credentialed because I can't go now. But okay, it brings me into it. So like a Conor McGregor, a Ronda Rousey, they bring me there. That's like I'm excited to watch it now. But if I go with you guys to Albany and you're trying to tell me this person, this person, this person, and I'm like, well, are they any good? I mean, if they're not that good, then what do I care?
That's the thing. This is not. Then the fight night cards, like Brian said, they're there to pull people's eyes to people you don't know yet, hoping that you're going to tune in for a free card. This is free. You're not paying for this. No. You just got to turn on your TV, Fox Sports 1, and there's your card.
This is a card where you build names up off of how exciting their fights are going to be. And the main card is going to be fireworks.
So let me see if I can make this somewhat of a correlation. Obviously, we all live in the Albany area. Is this almost like if I'm going in the summer to go watch a Tri-City Valley Cats game? Like I'm ready to see these guys who in 2, maybe 3 years can be major leaguers and ready to go from there.
It wouldn't even take that long. If Derek Lewis can come out and starch Abdurakhimov and have a great fight, I could see him on a main card of a pay-per-view and 2 fights, which is about, depending on how often he fights, 6 months to a year away from a title shot if he really comes out and goes hard. Now, that's not exactly a guarantee, and he'd really have to impress. But these are guys that you want to see go. Now, at the same time, the way this functions with the UFC is a little different. I mean, you have on this card a couple of guys that are hometown guys. Gian Volante's from Long Island. They want him on the card. Aljamain Sterling's a local New York guy. You have some guys on the undercard who are locals. You also have some guys who need to debut, and they want to put them on TV. And you have guys, they owe fights. This is the end of the year. This guy's supposed to have had 2 fights this year. He's only got 1. Let's scrap him a fight together real quick and throw him in there. This is what happens. This is not 205 is an anomaly. This is not normally your big time of the year for great cards.
That is the greatest. 205 is going to be the greatest card ever.
Which also affects this card. 205 on paper is the best MMA card ever.
You think because of how good 205 is, it really affected on how well they could really attract anybody to this card?
Yeah, you use up your names. I mean, this isn't football. You can't play next week. These guys fight, and they're going to be handed mandatory suspensions medically by the athletic commission or by the boxing commission here in New York that's going to say you can't even train for 30 days and then you can't compete in a real fight for 3 months unless you go to a doctor and get this injury cleared and that injury cleared. These guys will hurt themselves in training and come into this fight hurt, not maimed, but with a hurt and with something hurting them, whether it's a knee. And guys have fought with torn ACLs, broken hands, you name it, and they shouldn't, but they will. And then after the fight, the doctor finally gets a look at them and goes, you can't fight until you get that thing fixed. And they can't. So it's a little different. I mean, this is not a terrible card. There have been far worse cards.
No, if you look at the first card on the main card, the first fight on the main card, you have Aljamain Sterling versus Rafael Assunção. That fight right there, you have two of the top 10 bantamweights in the world right now, if not in the top 5, going at it. And if whoever wins that fight, all they need is 1, maybe 2 more fights, and they're going to be fighting against the champion.
Absolutely. And you'll hear me say this a million times. Styles make fights, and those styles match up. If you get a really boring wrestler against a really boring or a really strong kickboxer with no ground game, you're going to get a guy laying on a guy, banging his head off the canvas for 15 minutes. You have 2 guys here who are great everywhere.
Everywhere.
And will match up. It will be fireworks no matter where that goes. And that's a great fight. Some of these are really good fights. Ngannou-Hamilton is going to be fireworks. Even Cummins-Vellante should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a terrible card. I'm not going to go ahead and say it's a really good card or even an above average card, but it's not a terrible card. We've seen worse. I mean, you could have watched some of the Fight Pass cards in Sweden or in Brazil, and you would have been really depressed.
So you see that, guys? You're wrong. Deal with it, and we'll let you know, and I'm going to let you know every day of the week now that you're wrong, of course.
Even though you're kind of right.
Yeah, even though Ian says you're kind of right, but yeah, you're kind of wrong. Though.
Guys, it's definitely 50-50. It's not 205 worthy, but it's definitely a fight night worthy.
No, guys, you're wrong. 1045theteam.com. You're listening to the Fifth Round Podcast with your host, Ian Foard, Brian France. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian the closer, Mariano. Now, guys, I have to ask you this before we jump on. And Ian, I know you got a few topics we want to hit here before we end this podcast, but you talked about styles in the last segment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, we went through that phase with a few fights that there was a lot of quick knockouts. Rousey was a lot of quick knockouts. McGregor would knock people out. Now, that is great for the vines. The people that didn't want to buy the fight, but wow, did you see what Rousey just did? Is it better off to have a fight that's really quick and has a crazy ending that you could talk about for a few months? Or is it great to have something that's competitive for 5 rounds?
It really all depends. I mean, if you look at Bigfoot Silva versus Mark Hunt, that lasted all
3 rounds.
All 3 rounds.
To a draw.
And it was one of the greatest fights of all time.
Nobody won. On the other hand, same weight class, Andrei Arlovsky, Travis Brown. That fight doesn't leave the first round. That's one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. I mean, it depends on what you want to see. I mean, what are your favorite fights recently? I mean, for me, Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler is probably, if not the best, one of the 5 best fights ever. And that was an absolute 5-round war of 2 guys just crushing each other, hurting each other really bad. I mean, Rory McDonald walked out with the bone on the end of his nose, like the nasal bone right there, detached from the rest of his skull. I mean,
check that off.
They went nuts. It was a great fight. It was a 5-round war. But at the same time, now I got to look at my 2 favorite fighters and go, well, you guys aren't going to fight for a while.
Well, you also look at Rory McDonald against Stephen
Wonderboy Thompson.
Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. That didn't have a crazy amount of action, but it was more of the mental chess game that came about it because Rory had to try to figure out the karate that Wonderboy has, and it was just an amazing fight.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to try and place whether a guy's going to be exciting or not. There's a lot of people who hate watching wrestlers fight in the UFC.
Or jiu-jitsu fighters.
Somehow, George St. Pierre was really big, huge, most popular guy in Canada by far, and one of the top 5 draws in the UFC for years. And that guy was predominantly a wrestler who could not finish a fight.
Yeah.
He hadn't finished a fight in years when he retired. I mean, he couldn't finish a fight. The last guy he finished was BJ Penn way back. And BJ Penn quit on the stool. That's the only reason he got finished is he didn't get up for the last round. Like, he just wouldn't get off his stool in the corner.
Yeah, so it wasn't like he just knocked him right out on the mat. He just went back and wouldn't come out.
But then Rousey and Lesnar were popular because they had that it factor and they finished people. I mean, Lesnar came in and just that Frank Mir fight at UFC 100. He dropped those ham hock 4XL gloves on a dude, and you couldn't even look away.
He manhandled him. I mean, he literally had his one arm behind his back, just smashing Frank Mir.
And then Rousey couldn't leave the first round. Nobody could make it out of the first round except for Miesha Tate, who just got armbarred in the second. No big deal. Third. Correction. Third. Either way, that's the first time she'd ever left the first. And that was a rematch because Rousey had broken her arm the last time they fought. I mean, it's hard to judge. There are some of my favorite fights last 5 rounds. Some of my favorite fights are a crazy 2 minutes.
Yeah, so it could basically just be on who are the fighters that are going into that specific fight as opposed to just the way the fight ends up.
Once you watch enough of this, you can look at a fight, and if you've seen the guys fight before, you can generally tell. You don't know. You can't. I mean, if anybody says they can pick this and make money betting this, I want to meet them because it's really, it's crazy. Stuff happens that you never thought could happen.
Guys, if you're listening, let them know. We'll see what we can do here.
There's a lot of stuff that you just would never see coming. I mean, fights can end in a second, in a heartbeat. One mistake and you're out. Whether it's because your leg got broken, or your arm got snapped off, or you got knocked out. I mean, it can happen quick, but you can look at it and go, I think this is how this fight's going to play.
You know, Ian, I think you're right because there's many times you said this guy might not. I don't think he can lose, and my wallet has gotten lighter every time you've done that. So I don't know.
At the same time, you can tell. Like the easiest thing to do is I can sit with Brian and go, this is how this fight's going to play out, this way or this way. I'm not sure which one of the two, but those are the two options.
Yeah, that's definitely the best part about MMA is it can go so many different ways, and it's just watching it, just being there and watching those fights will make you a fan.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's people want to talk about McGregor going into boxing, or this guy Anderson Silva's going to fight Roy Jones Jr. and McGregor's going to fight Mayweather. What if Rousey fought Mayweather? Listen, this is MMA. There are so many facets to this game. There is the basic 3 of kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. Then you have judo fighters. Then you have Krav Maga fighters.
You got Muay Thai.
Yeah, Muay Thai kickboxing. You've got straight boxers. You've got guys who do weird stuff like Sambo. I mean, there's so many facets to this game that you very rarely find an expert in one. Rousey was crazy because she came in with one thing she did really well, and no one could stop her. But her striking, everybody saw when she fought Holly Holm, she looked great hitting mitts. She got punched in the face one time, and she forgot how to box. She's not going to go into a boxing ring and beat anybody. But Holly Holm is a world champion boxer and then got smoked by somebody else because that's what happens. You can't. These guys have so many things they have to learn. Mm-hmm. You're not an expert in any one thing, but you can look at certain guys and go, that fight's going to be fun because he's got a crazy jiu-jitsu game, and he's going to twist that guy up like a pretzel to hit the ground. But the fight starts on the feet, and that guy's got a crazy kickboxing game. So is he going to be able to get him down, or is somebody going to get smoked? I mean, we talked a few times about the Rousey fight, and I said it's either Holm's going to bounce around the outside and pick her apart, or Rousey's going to get her down and break her. Those are the only two options. Rousey's not knocking her out, and Holm's not going to get any sort of submission game work. She's not going to get any sort of this. It's not going to a decision. Rousey's going to get picked off on the outside, which is exactly what happened, or she's going to get her down and break her, and she couldn't when she got her down. And you can almost always narrow a fight down to 2.
1045theteam.com. Thank you guys for listening to the Fifth Round Podcast. Ian Foard, Brian Franz, producer Mariano here for you. Ian, we got about 12 minutes left to give these guys everything they need to know. What's up next, man?
All right, so we wanted to briefly touch on, me and Brian, Tito Ortiz, he of UFC fame, former UFC champion, has just recently signed to fight everybody's favorite, the bad guy, Chael Sonnen.
Well, isn't he the bad man and Tito Ortiz is the bad boy? Isn't that what Chael Sonnen said?
It depends. I thought Tito calls himself the people's champ now.
Is he The Rock? What is this?
He used to be the Huntington Beach bad boy, but he decided he's the people's champ, even though most people are really not all that big a fan of his. So
this he's the 5 people that like him champ.
This is right in the vein. Yeah, pretty much. This is right in the vein of what Bellator has been liking to do lately. They have a few guys that they like. Bobby Lashley, Liam McGeary, and a few others whose names they like and who are action fighters, and they continue to put them on. And then they sign away
They have the gimmick fights.
Yeah, the cast-offs. I mean, when you put on Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock, in 2016, 23 years after the first time they fought. Both of them are shells of their former selves and probably should not have been in a cage. This is what you get. Now, this one's not anywhere near that level. And this is not
even close.
This is not the late, great Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000. Better DeFear Harris. I refuse to call Dada 5000 ever again. Where he actually had a heart attack in the cage because he shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
This is two legit fighters, but they are both, winding their careers down. Sonnen hasn't fought since UFC 167. And Tito has not had a great career run lately. But this should be an interesting fight.
I think Chael at the end of the day should win it. I mean, his wrestling is going to be a little bit better because he is the younger man. He is a little faster. He's going to be able to control the pace for the most part. But you can never count out Tito Ortiz.
No, and if anybody is a fan of pro wrestling or of trash talk in general, you want to pay attention to this one. Oh. I don't get excited for Bellator fights all that often because a lot of them, the undercards are
if you smell.
Oh, my God. You have Chael Sonnen, who I still say is
king.
The best marketer ever. I think he's better than Conor McGregor at selling a fight.
He paved the way for Conor McGregor.
He's a genius. This guy talked his way into 3 title fights. And he also fought his way there. Those were, until he lost to Rashad Evans in his last fight, those were the only 3 losses he had in a very long time. But this man talked his way into title fights because he's a genius. And Tito Ortiz has been talking smack since the Best Damn Sports show way back in the day, fighting Ken Shamrock.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
These guys are both master trash talkers. Now, I take some points away from Tito with that man in the mask trick with Stephan Bonner. But, I mean.
Oh, that was terrible.
Oh. Man, it was real bad.
That was straight out of WWE. No, not even WWE. That was WWF.
That was 1980s WWF playbook. That was like the Hulk Hogan
NWO.
It was that bad. So, but this should be a great fight. Now, anybody who's a fan of Tito, sorry for you. He's 3-8-1 since he beat Ken Shamrock in 2006. He's got 3 wins since 2006, and 2 of them are in Bellator. One of them, the aforementioned Stephan Bonner, who should probably never see a cage.
Which I thought Stephan Bonner won that fight.
I thought Stephan Bonner won that fight, and I thought that fight was awful.
Oh, that was awful. Brian, I think we actually saw that fight together at Buffalo Wild Wings.
I think we did. I'm pretty sure we did, yeah.
Which, that was one of Bellator's top producing back then. Yeah, I mean, wasn't that one of the first that hit over $1 million?
It was a big show for them. That was a real big show. It wasn't as big as Kimbo Slice and DeFear Harris, and accompanied by Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, and the Nutshot heard around the world. But it
I don't even want to talk about that.
Yeah,
Nutshot.
There's 3 guys in this room. Let's keep that to a
not the fact that he got hit. It was more of the fact he got delayed for 30 seconds
and then felt pain.
And then they called the fight after him getting TKO'd.
We're going to get off that subject before I get real frustrated.
Let's not talk about that.
This is a family program, ladies and gentlemen. We apologize.
I'd say next, you want to break in with the Conor McGregor talk?
Hold on. Before we jump into that, Ian, I got a couple things I want to mention since we were on the wrestling topic. We didn't talk anything about the newcomer CM Punk.
Oh God.
Now, I know that this brought a lot of those, as Levac calls them, booger-eating wrestling fans over to watch UFC.
Don't even call it wrestling; it's wrestling. Wrestling.
But obviously, we didn't expect anything different out of that fight.
No.
He got his freaking butt kicked. But do you see any sort of future with this guy in the UFC? I know you can promote the name, but how many times can he go in there and get his butt kicked before he's out of here?
They did the best they could. I mean, again, it's a business at the end of the day.
Sure.
And this is as much entertainment as it is a fight company. They're trying to sell tickets.
Yeah.
They did their best. They got a guy who was only 1-0 and had that one professional fight against another guy debuting and put him on a card, let him fight, got his name out there enough to where they could sell that fight with Punk. Now, CM Punk comes in and fights him, a guy who is legitimately 1-0 and has not been doing this for very long, and he gets really, really badly hurt. I mean, he got the brakes beat off him. It was bad.
It was hard to watch, honestly. I mean, I was at Buffalo Wild Wings. We watched this with a few of us, and it was just, after about a minute or so, you realize that he was completely outmatched. I mean, this wasn't even close.
No. and I feel bad. You got to respect the guy.
Do you, though?
You got to respect the guy for wanting to do it and
Yeah.
for having the guts to get up and do it. And not a lot of guys would. But he should have gone the Dave Bautista route. He should have said, no, I am not going to do the UFC. The UFC knew they were going to make money, but they knew what they were going to get. They knew they were going to get one shot and a lot of money, and that's it. I would be surprised if they don't cut him very soon. Dana White has talked about he probably doesn't belong here, but they haven't made any moves. He should have gone the Dave Bautista route. For anybody that doesn't know, Dave Bautista had one MMA fight, and it looked like a guy who trained for a few months and probably shouldn't have been in a cage, but he did it at a smaller show, a regional show, as they're known.
So like it's something like what Albany has.
Yeah.
So if he came out in Albany and fought, name that person, whoever, it's a little bit better route for him.
It would have been I don't even remember the name of the show, but it was not a major company. He did not make a lot of money doing it, unfortunately for him. But he fought a guy named Vince Lucero, who had quite a few fights on his record, but was just a big guy who knew how to throw a punch once or twice. He was a big chubby dude, and he was older, and the guy would never have hacked it even in the World Series of Fighting or Bellator. He wouldn't have had a hope. And Dave Bautista came out, got the fight done because he wanted to do it. I mean, CM Punk set himself up for failure, Brian.
Well, I mean, he did only train for 2 years before he had this fight. Mickey Gall,
For 2 years, France.
2 years. I mean, Mickey Gall,
With
even,
surgeries.
even
Yeah.
with the little experience he had inside the cage, Mickey Gall has been training for at least 8 to 10 years longer than CM Punk has.
Sure.
So he at least knows what he was doing. CM Punk was barely even a white belt when he decided he was going to sign with the UFC.
Yeah.
So
And for anybody who doesn't know what a white belt is, that's where you start.
It's not
that's
good.
basically a rookie in the
Not
NFL.
good.
or
I
any other.
am also a white belt.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know.
I'm a white belt in anything I want to go sign up for a class tomorrow.
You're right.
Because that's where you start.
Actually, my belt's brown, but it's. I mean, I call myself a white belt. I
And
guess.
on top of that, CM Punk was 38 years old with all kinds of pre-existing injuries.
Back injuries, back
Yep.
surgeries. I mean,
Hey man, listen, that WWE lifestyle is no joke, man.
They
No.
take a beating.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't call those guys an athlete for a day. I'm just not that guy. But they
How dare you? The Undertaker was almost undefeated at WrestleMania.
for me, athlete means you're competing, but they are really physically tough guys who take a beating and do a lot of crazy stuff and do some real hard work. And more respect to those guys for doing something successful, but they're not athletes. Brock Lesnar was a freak. He was a wrestler. Phil Brooks is not.
All right, we'll get off the CM Punk train because that was I almost went down the rabbit hole. I'm almost upset I did, but either way, guys, this is on UFC.com right now. It says it's already October. There have been some epic fights in 2016. Which of these fights is your favorite so far? Okay, all right. Which one is your fight of the year? Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. Sorry. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor 2.
it's got to be 2. Not 1 was good, but 2 would definitely be better.
All right, you guys are going to have to help me with these names. Joanna
Jędrzejczyk.
There you go. And Claudia.
Gadelia.
There you go. Or any other fight.
Those are the only 3 options?
Those are the 3 options. Then it says other.
Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler, hands down. That is the
No.
one.
That's
Rory,
Lawler and
No,
Condit.
I'm going any other.
You're going
other.
elsewhere. Okay. All right.
They're not putting him up there because Rory's not with the UFC right now. So that's why he's not on the list.
Oh, Dana White, how dare you?
That's the fight of the year, the decade, and probably ever. Anybody who hasn't seen a fight before, if you've never watched an MMA fight,
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first on the 5th Round Podcast. That is the fight of the year.
now Lawler McDonald or Lawler Condit, also amazing.
Now,
Anybody. Lawler versus a loaf of bread. I'll pay for it.
Except for,
It's got to be sliced bread.
I mean, the Tyrone Woodley fight, that definitely wouldn't be fight of the year.
Yeah, don't watch that.
Well, you can watch it because
Yeah, but you're not gonna. It's,
fantastic knockout.
Quick.
But if you're a fan of Robbie Lawler, do not watch that fight.
no, if you want a great fight, I got to go with Lawler McDonald. Out of those options, Lawler Condit.
Out of those options, Lawler it would definitely be one of the top.
Now, that's not to take anything away from any of those fights.
No, the Diaz McGregor 2 fight, that was phenomenal. It was a great game plan by McGregor, and Nate Diaz is just, he can take a punishment, man.
Did you see his face in that? Like, he's unreal, man.
Unreal.
I would have one of those CM Punk things where the guy hits me and I'm done. See you later.
I mean,
Thanks for my money.
he gets knocked down twice in the first round, once in the second round, comes back at the end of the second round to almost take that round.
It's that pace he pushes.
Then
Yeah.
comes into the third round, just absolutely demolishes McGregor in that round. and then the rest of the fight, you think Conor McGregor or Nate can take it. It was amazing fight.
It was a great fight. And for anybody who was a fan of Rousey and you haven't seen Joanna Jędrzejczyk, or however you pronounce that name, it's tough.
It is tough.
You need to watch her.
France, you're our name guy for the rest of this podcast, just to let you know.
You need to watch.
Ian's better at names than I am.
Are you? Well, you could have just fooled me there. Are you kidding me?
No, I don't even know
Dude,
how you
just
pronounce it.
I mean, that looks like a Scrabble board where you just take the bag and just like pour it on the table. That's what that
she
name
wants
looks
everybody. She told everybody just call me Joanna Champion. So we're gonna go with Joanna Champion.
Yeah,
all right.
she is
I
definitely one of the pound for pound fighters right now.
She is the 115 pound women's champion, and if you have not seen her fight yet, you need to get on
absolute
that.
killer.
If you like watching the women fight, Joanna's the one for you. She's a killer. I mean, she has got some of the best striking you will see in the UFC out of anybody, any weight class. She's crazy.
Make sure you watch her fight Karolina Kowalczyk at 205. That fight is going to be phenomenal.
Oh, my God, yeah. Two kickboxers.
Ooh.
You got to make sure you check out the Fifth Round podcast when we do this the week of UFC 205, because our two experts, Ian Foard and Brian France, will be giving you their picks for that entire card. And even though Ian says you can't make money off this, we try. I'm a horse racing guy, of course. I'll plug. You can check out the Paddock Pass on 1045theteam.com if you're into horse racing, because I will give you that. But other than that, Ian, we're hitting just about the hour mark. Let's get to our last topic and give these guys something they can remember us by.
Last topic. Conor McGregor says he might be walking away for a bit. For a little bit.
Well, he needs to get through this fight.
Yeah, he does.
Is he overlooking this fight by saying this?
I don't think so. I don't think Conor overlooks much, but then again, he did overlook Nate Diaz the first time.
But he didn't have enough time to game plan. That's the one thing about Conor McGregor, I will say. He game plans like no other, but it's secret. Everything he does is almost secret to everyone else.
And that was the weakness the first Diaz fight. He didn't game plan.
He couldn't.
He came out, I'm going to knock him out. That's what he said, and he tried, and you can't.
Yeah, but can we, with what we know about Conor McGregor, can we really just take what he says at face value?
I think
because he's such an entertainer and he's such a guy on the mic.
It's not really coming from him. It's coming from reports from people in his camp. And Dana White said something. It's more his girlfriend. I'm not going to remember her name, that he's been with forever. He wants to marry her. He's got some things he wants to do.
She definitely deserves to be to get married. Finally, he needs to put a ring on that. They've been together since way before UFC days, when he was on welfare back in Ireland.
And the guy's been fighting a lot. I mean, people don't. If people know Conor McGregor and not MMA, he fights a lot. He fights way more often than a lot of guys. I mean, we had a heavyweight champion in the UFC who couldn't fight once every year or year and a half at one point. He was always hurt. Conor is fighting through small little injuries, little dings and nicks. And he doesn't get an off season like you do in football, basketball, baseball. He doesn't get that off season. So he wants one. And he wants to get married. And he's got stuff he wants to do. So word is he's going to take a year off. He says a year-ish. That's the word. Dana White insinuated that he had some sort of announcement for us after 205. And that was about it. That he would see it in the cage. Conor would give you some sort of announcement. Now, if he wins that belt, he'll be the first fighter ever in the UFC to hold two belts at the same time, the second ever in any major MMA promotion.
Do you think if he wins, he retires for good?
Nah, no way.
No?
He's too young.
Like, not even a little chance at all?
Too young, too good.
He makes too much money.
Yeah, too young, too good, too greedy. No way.
Okay. All right. I like that. I mean, and I would be shocked. Agreed. I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that, because this seems to be really interesting, because you're taking a break in the middle of probably the best point of his career.
Oh, his prime.
Right now. It's definitely in his prime. And
he may not even be in his prime yet, because most people in their prime are usually around that 31, 32 years old.
Oh, yeah.
He's only 26, 27 years old right now.
That's when we saw Chuck Liddell run away with it. That's when we saw a lot of the best champions, Lyoto Machida. That's when we saw a lot of guys really hit their stride. That's when your technique catches up with your body.
Yeah, but in a sport where you're one punch away from everything being over, can we really say that this guy is still years away from his peak?
It may very well be. And
I mean, for all of us fans, we hope it is. I mean, that means only better things are coming for us.
For all we know, he wants a couple of months to heal up and relax and enjoy the money he's been making.
And stay away from the media.
Yeah, this isn't, I mean, unfortunately for these guys, this isn't like baseball or football where it's a long season, but you get those months. This is an every single day, get up, eat, sleep, and breathe fighting. They go to the gym 3 times a day. It's like get up, get breakfast, get to the gym at 6 a.m., work out until 10, go home, have some lunch, relax for a couple hours, go back for 2 o'clock, train again, get back out at 7 o'clock, 6, 7 o'clock, relax for a couple hours, go back in and train again because you're doing wrestling in the morning and jiu-jitsu in the afternoon and boxing at night or conditioning here. These guys, their lives are crazy, and they have to maintain weight. They have to hit weight classes. Conor McGregor is now putting himself in a real tough spot because he fought at 170 and he's supposed to be fighting at 145. So he's got to somehow make his way back down. He's losing 15 pounds from the Diaz fight for this. So maybe he just wants some time to eat a cheeseburger and some ice cream and heal up.
And not to mention,
few Guinness.
Even during training, you have to go with the media obligations. You're getting called by people all the time. So he just needs a break from everything.
Yeah, UFC 200. That's why he didn't fight.
Yeah. Hey, he fought only 2 months after.
He did. I still say I think he just needs some time off. It
not even
wouldn't
2
surprise me.
months.
And we don't blame him for doing this.
No, it
right?
wouldn't surprise me.
He's he's already in a short amount of time done enough.
The tricky question is going to be, say he wins that fight. Now he has 2 belts and he leaves. What do Dana White and the UFC do? Do they take those belts away, or do they put the weight class on hold again for
You can't
a year?
put both weight
they-
classes on hold.
Do they owe him that for what he's done?
At the same time, doesn't Jose Aldo deserve a title rematch? Now Conor McGregor took his belt and hasn't fought at 145 since. He's been bouncing everywhere else.
So that raises the question then, if they hold it and then say, okay, Jose Aldo gets his chance when Conor comes back, is it really fair to make Jose wait that long?
No, because now if you're Jose, this is the fight game. This is what it stinks for these guys. Because now if that happens, Jose Aldo's got to decide, okay, Conor left. So I can wait and I don't get paid for a whole year.
Yep.
I'm at this guy's mercy whenever he wants to come back. Or I take more fights and fight other people. But if I lose to those other people,
you lose that.
There goes my Conor fight. And the Conor fight is the big payday. So you end up in this spot where it's you damned if you do and damned if you don't. Where do you go?
Yeah, and Jose Aldo was trying to get out of his contract just a month ago, not even. But somehow he visited with the UFC brass, and things are starting to turn around, and he's talking about fights again.
That's like Conor said. And it's like, say this, I don't know. I'm a Packer fan. Green Bay Packers win the Super Bowl this year.
Excuse me, this is the home of the New York Jets, so you can kindly leave through the door. Thank you.
So the New York Jets win the Super Bowl this year. I don't know how that's going to happen with Geno. But
No.
So Geno Smith's not hurt, and he miraculously comes back, and they win the Super Bowl. Okay. Now the Jets say, yeah, so we don't think we're going to play the 2017 season. So, you can't knock off the champ because we're just not going to play. Or the NFL, better yet, just cancels the Super Bowl for the year. That's what you do to these guys if you let the champion take a year off. You go, yeah, you can't get to the peak. You can't have that. You don't get to be champ because, we're just going to let him wait. So you guys can fight each other for nothing for a while.
Now,
It's still a payday, but-
can the UFC go after Conor for this?
No,
So the only way they can do this, obviously, is to strip him of these and then
Absolutely.
say, okay, well, you do what you got to do.
when you come back, you have a shot.
You have to still now earn these back. You're not just given these back.
That's what I would do if I was them. There are the options for interim titles, but
Well, Conor did say that he said when he wins the lightweight title, he's going to rejoice, have a few pictures taken, relax with them, enjoy the moment, and then he's going to choose one title or the other and let the other one go.
Yeah.
So,
Which is smart. That's smart. At this point, why kill yourself to try and win at 2 different levels?
it's just
He wouldn't be able
can
to.
when he can dominate at one.
absolutely, especially when you're talking about that weight cutting. That is it's not even healthy for your body to keep going up and down 15 pounds over and over and over again. And you're not talking about eating some cheeseburgers, getting chubby, you gain 15 pounds. You're talking peak physical shape. Have to put 15 pounds of muscle on and then you drop it again.
I know how to do that. As you guys could see before we taped this podcast, what I was eating. But either way, listen, man. I think Conor McGregor has brought in a lot of different people that really, they like his brashness. They like the way he goes after people because it's entertaining. It brings in someone like me.
Until he starts throwing monster cans at people and get fined for $75K.
yeah, but
but that's what's exactly
that
going
pulls
on with,
fans. He
yeah,
let
absolutely.
people
That's
so many more
entertaining.
fans.
That's entertaining. That's
People
what
love
Odell Beckham Jr. is doing right now. That's what you're seeing in these sports. It brings in those
He's
people.
original. He's absolutely original. There hasn't been anybody like him in the UFC or in MMA to this point, and that's what you're looking for. All the big names. Chuck Liddell was the first one out there with the Fu Manchu and the mohawk and the crazy head tattoos, and that was what was cool. And then you went to Anderson Silva with the crazy matrix moves. I mean, that's always what sells. Be an individual. Don't play the same. And this is the problem we were talking about the other day. A lot of guys want to do the same thing. Oh, I'll fight whoever the UFC gives me. That's great. But as a fan, I don't want to hear you say you're going to fight whoever they give you. I want you to turn around and go, that dude, I want him.
I want him. I'm going to beat him. This is how I'm going to do it.
Can't wait.
Seriously. But I mean, what was better than Brock Lesnar winning, turning around and saying he's going to go home, have himself a Coors Light because Bud Light was all over the octagon, and then he was going to do awful things to his wife.
Oh my God. And
that's
now
the
people are like,
greatest thing ever.
Listen, you don't have to love him. There are a lot of people out there. If you go on mixed martial arts websites and you are one of the guys who likes to browse forums and talk on chat rooms and people with mixed martial arts.
You mean like you?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are, if not as many, more people that hate Conor McGregor than love him.
I can see that.
The real hardcore fan base that watches every card, a lot of guys hate him. They hate him because casual observers love him. Like the guys who don't watch every card do. But guess what? They're still paying because they want to see him lose.
So how do you feel about Conor McGregor, Ian?
I think Conor McGregor's great. I think he's entertaining. There are very few fighters that get a real, I love him, I hate him reaction out of me.
Sure.
That I'm like, that guy's my fighter. I love him. Huge fan or can't stand him.
God, I hate that guy. Yeah.
I think Conor McGregor is entertaining and he makes me want to watch a fight. So kudos to him. That's it.
No matter what card Conor fights on, I want to see him either win by knockout or lose. Yeah, I just want to see him fight.
He's one of those guys where if you hate him, you hope he gets into the octagon and gets his butt whipped. You want him to get absolutely pummeled. And then if you're a guy who loves him, you want to make sure that he beats that guy, comes out, and then just throws it in his face, just like he normally does.
That's what you get with every weight class. I mean, there are champions out there right now who can't manage to get a reaction out of people.
Yeah, poor Demetrius Johnson. 125-pound champ, the best fighter in the world. Can't get fans.
If you want to talk technical prowess and just skill as a martial artist, he is far and away, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of experts, the best fighter on the planet, pound for pound, and possibly the best ever. But nobody wants to watch him fight.
He is basically almost as close to perfect of a fighter in MMA as you can get.
He submits people. He knocks people out. He just beats people around the cage for 25 minutes. He does anything you want him to do. He has gone every way he could go other than a loss. And nobody tunes into his cards. When they put him on a pay-per-view, they sell 140,000 buys as the main event.
Ugh.
And then you put Conor McGregor up and you sell 1.4 million.
Because he knows how to talk. He's beautiful.
That's what
mic.
you need. I mean, the UFC is definitely a little, it's the new age WWE because you need these guys to go out and trash talk each other and really promote fights like boxing used to back in the Ali days.
This is prize fighting. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, they want to make it a team sport. They want the uniforms like the NFL has, or almost like soccer has. If you watch, they're color coded by country. All the uniforms, the shorts they wear are all color coded by the country's flag.
Sure,
They want it to be that, but this is prize fighting. This is always going to be prize fighting. It's prize fighting with a little bit of the WWE mixed in, which just gives you a lot of fun. I mean, that's what it's for. It's why they hold the press conferences.
Yeah, no matter what, the UFC, at the end of the day, they need entertaining fighters that are going to go out, knock people out or submit people, and have amazing mic presence. They need the mic presence.
Yeah, so they need to bring in a fan like me by having that.
Yeah, that's I mean,
and that's how you're going to draw the novice fan and hopefully grab them to hold them on for fights further down the line.
That's pretty much it. I'm going to watch the card no matter what. I'm going to watch it because I enjoy the fighting.
Sure.
If you don't enjoy the fighting, then you better enjoy the story. As Chael Sonnen said on his podcast last week when I was listening to it, it's guys want to go out and claim, I want that title shot. I want that title shot. That doesn't sell. Title fights are great. The title fight isn't generally what makes the card great. The grudge match is what makes the card great. Title fights are awesome. Everybody wants to be the champ. And championship fights are great. I love them. But nothing's more enjoyable than two guys who hate each other going in and fighting. This is fighting. Take advantage of it. Even if you don't hate the guy, say you do.
Like Dan Henderson, he didn't really deserve the title shot against Michael Bisping for the middleweight title, but Michael Bisping and him had a huge grudge.
Yeah.
And it sold.
Yeah, I don't think Conor McGregor has any ill will towards Jose Aldo, but he sure made it seem like he did. I think Jose doesn't like him, but I don't know if it's mutual. I think Diaz and McGregor don't like each other. I don't think McGregor dislikes Eddie Alvarez in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Doesn't seem like it, but he sure talks enough smack to make it seem like he wants him through the canvas, not just on it.
1045theteam.com. It's the 5th Round podcast. Guys, our first episode is wrapped up. It was a lot of fun being a part of it with you guys. Hopefully we will get more listeners as we push this along, and hopefully you guys can follow us. Are you guys, either of you, on Twitter?
Twitter? Actually,
Facebook?
no.
You're not on Twitter?
No.
All right, we're gonna push this forward.
I'm on Instagram.
All right, France, what's your Instagram?
BS Designs.
All right,
33.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I got nothing for you, bud.
All right, man.
I'll get there.
What we're going to do
I'll get
is,
there next week.
France, you're our social media guy. You told me you're going to get us on Facebook, going to get us on Twitter. All right, we'll push that along. We'll push all these podcasts on Twitter. You can hear it on 1045theteam.com. Guys, I appreciate it. And make sure when you guys listen and you come and see us, you guys are going to be in Albany, right?
Absolutely.
All right, come and say hi. You guys are going to be in Albany. I don't know if I'm going to be there. I might grab that press pass. We'll see.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. But when you guys see us in Albany, we'll see you guys in the Octagon.